Welcome to Althing Considered, a conversation on life and faith in heathenry, Ásatrú and Norse paganism from the Troth, education and service for the inclusive heathenry.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Althing Considered, the show from the Troth, where we talk about interesting topics pertaining to Ásatrú, heathenry, and Norse paganism. And tonight we have a special show about interfaith relationships and how they work, how sometimes they don't work, and raising kids in them. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Sorry, I just kind of drifted off there for a second. Lauren will be with us, I think, maybe later tonight. Right now, she's actually just on Court TV. She's actually the resident expert on Norse paganism, Ásatrú, and heathenry. The reason why that's important is because otherwise there is no voice for heathens or Ásatrú or Norse paganism on those programs where they're discussing a very grisly murder and of two children. And if we aren't represented there where they're actually talking about working Odinism as an angle in that case, no one's going to be speaking for us at all. And it's just going to be a lot of conjectures. So we're glad she's there. But tonight I actually have three wonderful guests. In the meanwhile, first I want to introduce Erica, our special guest. Erica, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Ben. How are you?
Great. Erica is a second-generation heathen, Govia of House of Nine Ways, and the host of That Pagan Mom, a pagan parenting podcast that focuses on building a better world through community, family traditions, and communication with our kids. If you're interested in learning more about Erica and whatever it is that she has to say from week to week, you can find her on Instagram at That Pagan Mom, and you can follow her podcast at Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Don't let me have dusting off glitter from
yeah.
It's my kids. So anyway, sorry.
We also have with us we're delighted to have us the Reverend Tim Adams. Tim is clergy with the Troth. He is also our director of service and on the board of directors with the Troth. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Good. Glad to be here this evening.
Yeah, and last but certainly not leastly, we have the pleasure of having Tom DeMeo with us. Tom is he is the assistant president to the Troth, or associate president to the Troth, and also a member of the board. He's also the provost of the lore program. So if you send in your heathen, you may have seen his name grading many of your essays and tests. If you want to know the guy who makes the comments, he's right here. Here's Tom.
That's me. Is my sound working okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much. All right, we're just going to switch into it. So tonight's topic is about interfaith relationships. So if you guys could, so for me, I'm actually in an interfaith relationship, part of an interfaith family. My wife's family is Catholic, and I'm not. And we actually had the story of our wedding is actually one of the things I wanted to touch on tonight, because it was actually building our wedding that actually was and I hear this a lot from pagans who want to tie the knot, from Norse pagans who want to tie the knot. They don't quite know how to work with their future spouses, families, religious beliefs. So I'm here to definitely help you guys out with that one and give you some ideas. But Erica, if you want to introduce yourself and your expertise, what you were hoping to talk about tonight.
Okay, Well, I am also in an interfaith marriage. I'm a heathen, right? Second gen heathen. My dad is an Ásatrú. My mom is vaguely Christian in a way that, like, the kind of the way people who aren't super religious are kind of vaguely Christian, if that makes sense, here in the US. And so I was raised knowing who the Norse gods were, but not super religious. And I became, more religious as I got older. And my husband is Hindu. He was raised Catholic and then converted to being a Vaishnav. He's actually a Hare Krishna, for lack of a better term. The guys in the airport with flowers.
Vishnayist, right?
Vaishnav, yeah. And we've been married for 16 years, together for 18, and we have a 6-year-old. And by the way, we avoided the marriage issues, Ben, because we went to the courthouse. Like, that's all. We were like, nope.
A path that many people have taken. I will not begrudge a single person for just saying, screw it, we're going down to the courthouse, or we're going to Vegas. I've seen it happen. I've seen it work, and it's not. And the results speak for themselves. 16 years married.
Yeah.
So yes, you can. It's not necessarily just about where you start; it's about where you're going. Now, Tim, you also have an interesting story, because your story also features a conversion, right?
Yeah. So my wife and I were both Roman Catholic. I am now Norse heathen, and we've been together for 39 years, 35 years married, and still going strong. So, but it's been interesting as I went through my own conversion process from Roman Catholicism to heathenry, how we continue to work together as a team and continue to support one another. So it's been quite a journey, but one that I wouldn't give up for anything.
Oh, awesome. And Tom, I especially, one of the reasons I wanted to get Tom on, he actually has a very interesting story. Tom, maybe you've described, I believe you are married to a reverend.
I'm married to a deacon. My wife is basically an African-American Baptist, and her father, before he passed, was the pastor of their church, which is in Virginia. It's one of a number of series of churches that African Americans established after the end of the Civil War, with a kind of a network of them about far enough apart that you could travel to any one church from anywhere in the county without too much transit. And I met her about the same time I was going through my conversion experience. So she's sort of been with me the whole way. And we now have a daughter. But when we got married, we had a sort of a kind of an agreement. So we're raising the daughter in my wife's church. I'm not, hiding anything I do from her, although she's only 8 and she hasn't really gotten to the point where this will be meaningful to her yet. But yeah, so that's sort of my story.
Awesome. I look forward to digging even more into it as we talk about the different kinds of questions that come up. So the first one is how do you negotiate a relationship between two faiths? How do you in terms of either you come to it, like with my wife and I, my wife knew I'd been heathen the whole time. And with you guys with conversion experiences during the relationship, I really want to hear about those too. So Erica, did you come to this as a heathen, or did you convert during the relationship?
Oh no, I was raised with heathenry and
yes.
with my mom's faith. Yeah, so no, I didn't convert, and my husband converted when he was 16, and so we were both firmly, stubbornly stuck in our ways when we met, because I was in my early 20s and he was 28, and we just kind of lived together. Our son is only 6, so we kind of just lived together with our two faiths, and his actually kind of has taken over a little bit more of my life than mine has. His, I'm a vegetarian now, but it wasn't really a forceful thing. I've never really liked eating meat, so it was like it's not hard. But in general, like the conversion has literally just been the two of us figuring out how to live together. There's no real proper conversion in our household.
And I do want to point out, Erica, and I just want to look at the camera when I say this. See, heathen vegetarians are possible, people. It does happen.
Yes.
It does happen.
Yes.
We're not all just chowing down on pork all the time, although it does feature.
You have another heathen that you know who's a vegetarian, right? Stacey.
Who else is a vegetarian?
Stacey.
Oh, that's right.
Midwest
Stacey. That's right. She is also a vegetarian. It's true. But she hasn't been on the show yet. But this is video proof, everybody. There is such a thing as a heathen vegetarian. It does exist, and it's fine. Tim, so you guys have both both been Roman Catholic. How did you guys navigate that transition, and how did you kind of renegotiate this new faith into the relationship?
Well, I think one of the big things that continues to make our relationship strong is that we focus on shared values. And so even now as a grandfather and being actively involved in my grandchildren's lives, it's about living day to day. It's about respecting one another. It's about doing the little things that are really important to continually build the relationship, because just like anything, life is a journey, so is a relationship. And you've got to be willing to put in the work to keep it going and keep things running and focus on what is common ground between the both of you.
Yeah, right on. And Tom, how did you was your wife always in that deacon position, or did that change throughout?
She became a deacon just a couple of years ago, but she'd always been really active in her church. Her father, like I said, was the minister for a while. I don't know. I guess I came into all of this really kind of back asswards. I was raised Methodist by pretty liberal Protestant parents. And by my mid-teenagers, I realized that was not me. And then I was basically a kind of an agnostic or soft atheist or something, all the way through graduate school, got my PhD, came out to Arizona to start my job. And this was about the same time that I started getting kind of come closer to Odin. And I had been, I'm trained as a medievalist, and I had always really liked the Icelandic literature and the mythology and all of that. So I had all of this basically background knowledge that I had done, part of it for my PhD, which is basically in medieval religion. And so I came into it sort of with the lore first, and then I guess I must have been circling around it because my father and I went to Iceland on vacation, and that's sort of where I had some of the sort of cementing, experiences. So I got back from Iceland, and I said, okay, I'll give this a go for, about a year or so. And I was also dating online, and I met Diane about the same time on a site called Geek to Geek. I tried other things like eHarmony. It kept matching me up with like grad students in Washington, D.C. And that wasn't going anywhere. So I said, okay, so what's my core identity here? So I went to the Geek place, and we met, I guess it was around Valentine's Day. And we hit it off, but she describes herself as a Christian with a big toolbox. So somewhat ironically, she'd done more of the kind of mystical, magic-y kind of stuff than I had. I've always been interested in the history of magic and the source texts and that sort of thing, but I didn't actually believe in it until I started going through this conversion experience. So in some ways, she was kind of my guide through sort of encountering, I don't know what you would say, spiritual experiences for the first time. She went with me to the oracular Saith, where I ended up making a devotion to Odin, and we got married. I guess about 6 months or so after that. Oh no, we got engaged about 6 months or so after that, and married maybe about a year later. So that was in 2010, and we've been together ever since.
Wonderful. I love hearing these stories. I wanted to kind of jump. I wanted to say, like, one of the things my wife and I connected on when we were first dating was really weird was that we were both what would technically be termed apostates from Islam. Both of us had we were both we were both people that don't, you don't typically think of as like converts to Islam, but I converted to Islam when I was 14. And my wife had converted when she was in her late teens. And it was a really interesting experience. We were both kind of talking to each other about it, and like, hey, you know a lot about Islam. Hey, did you convert? Yes, you did. We both, wow. And we were both talking about the experience of like getting into the community and then like leaving the community as well. We kind of bonded over that. And then I'm like, yeah, and I'm pagan now. So, so and this is I don't know if this is a problem, and maybe you guys have run into this too, but with other kinds of religions, let's say it's Islam, I might be able to tell somebody precisely what it is. Like, okay, here's the Quran. You read this, and you get a good grasp of what I think. Or you come to my mosque or my masjid, and you listen to my imam, and that's kind of what I believe. And for me, when my wife's like, well, what do you guys believe? Well, what do you guys believe? And I'm like, put me on the spot here. And it's strange because what I've believed in heathenry has changed so much, even ever since I've met her. I almost feel like I've had a conversion experience of my own, even though I'm in the same religion I was, 20 years ago. I feel like I've converted almost every single year. I just keep converting back to the same religion. So how have you guys ever felt the same way? And how have you navigated like those changes when someone is asking you, well, come on, what are your values? What do you believe? And you're kind of like, I don't know. I'm kind of in a weird place with that. Go into the panel.
Oh, okay. I'll go.
Yeah.
First, Ben, I just want to wish you a good Ramadan.
I haven't in a very long time.
I'm just letting you know.
It's been a while.
I'm
sure I remember how, though.
I actually only know that it's Ramadan currently because my building is so interesting. I live in New York City, and my building is predominantly Muslim.
Yeah.
And then my neighborhood is predominantly Orthodox Jewish. So we've got this really interesting, like, cultural situation going on. And what I really love is with everything going on in the world, they're all very lovely and kind to each other. So it's really great. So anyway, when you said you convert from Islam, it made me kind of be like, oh, heck. So anyway, this actually came up when I was pregnant with my son. Not Ramadan, but explaining heathenry. My father-in-law was raised Jesuit Catholic, like hardcore from like pre-K. I don't know if they had pre-K 65 years ago, but like whatever the Louisiana equivalent of pre-K was 65 years ago, he was in it all the way up through college. And he messaged me, so this was almost 7 years ago, like to the month, and was like, look, I have to talk to you about the weird things you believe. And I was like, what do I believe? And I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty combative. So like I'm always prepared to fight.
I've seen your Instagram.
Yeah, see. You've talked to me before. But I was confused, and I was just like, well, what do you think I believe? He was like, well, you think Harry Potter is real? Just side note, I don't. And he was like, and you believe in comic book characters and all of this weird stuff. And I was like, I don't think Harry Potter is real. I just really like I have a tattoo. I really like the series. I was like, and are you talking about Thor? He was like, well, of course I'm talking about Thor. What other comic book characters are there? And I was like, so many.
The Punisher? I don't know.
Where do we start? And so then I was like, look, I don't think you know anything about my faith system and the culture that I'm part of. Because I think a lot of people forget that heathenry isn't just a faith system. Like Ásatrú isn't just a faith. Can I swear? Because I was going to say the A word. It's a whole ass culture. Okay. And so I was explaining to him, I was like, look, I'm not out here like hugging trees. I mean, I'm sure there are heathens that do that, but what I'm actually doing is I'm recognizing the spirit in the world around me. I'm an animist, so I do recognize that these trees are alive. Science says they are. They talk to each other, and I believe in science. So I explained it from that point. I was like, I honor the land because that's what I live here. Why wouldn't I? And I honor my spirits of my home because inherently, if I live in this home, it's going to develop a personality, even if that personality is mine. And then I honor the ancestors because, and I even said, it's not worship, it's veneration. I'm recognizing that they are still living through me. And then I was like, and when you get to the gods, these gods are all just as real as your Christ. And he was just like, wow, how could you say that? And then I even said, I was like, it's even in your 10 commandments, no other God before me. It doesn't mean that there are no other gods. It just means that you need to focus on your God while I focus on mine. And they're all very real to me. This man, 2 years later, participated in a bloat to Freya and Thor and was happy to do it. And so like that conversation, I don't know, because he was like, I didn't realize any of that. He just thought I was out here worshiping comic book characters and Harry Potter, which if that's your thing, but it's not mine. So anyway.
Yes, I thank you for sharing that story. And look at what we have. Look at what we have. A crow flew in while you were talking. We have Lauren Crow's with us right off of the Court TV appearance. I heard it went well. Hey, Lauren, how are you? Mic's off. Can you hear me, Lauren? I don't know if Lauren can hear us yet. Lauren's might be still connecting. So just to ask, it was a great story, Erica, about talking with your dad. I've not had that conversation with my parents, and as Tim heard the childhood trauma episode, I'm not saying I had childhood trauma. Quite the opposite. My parents don't ever want to talk about religion ever. In fact, I think one of the phrases my mom said to me before I went to high school was, "Now, Ben, there are 3 things that are going to screw up your life: sex, drugs, and religion." And and then after getting in high school, I promptly converted to Islam. So.
I just want to stress it was my father-in-law, not my dad. My dad is
father-in-law.
He says I'm not religious enough. So like
okay.
The other complete spectrum. So yeah.
Apologies. Yes, father-in-law. I thought I missed the in-law part. Yeah, that was so. When my parents don't ask the question because they really don't like. What do you even? They don't talk to me about their religion, and I don't talk to them about mine. It's become a thing. But Tim, I wanted. Oh, wait, Lauren, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Sorry,
Great.
So I just got off a different. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep,
okay.
We can hear you.
Sorry, I just got off a different video system, and my settings were all screwed up, so I had to fix them. Sorry, I was on Court TV, so.
I'm actually so glad you came on because this 5-panel setup actually doesn't cut my head off with the Althing Considered, which it just cuts my hair, what's left of it, all the way down.
Ben, there's a custom 4-person layout you can use that I made so it doesn't cut your head off.
Don't tell me things that make my life better.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry, guys. Sorry I'm late. Like I said, had to go and I had a whole segment to myself, guys. I didn't have to argue with any like prosecutors or anything. It was great.
Amazing. I'm happy.
But yes, I am I'm an interfaith marriage too, so my husband's an atheist. So
there you go. And I wanted to pop over to Tim quick about the same question of like the idea of when someone asks you what you believe. So the question I was posing to the panel was, what is it like when we don't have a set creed or a set anything we can just give to somebody and say, this is what I believe? And what's it like when you, as I said, you sometimes feel like you're constantly converting to the same religion over and over again? So Tim, Tim, if you could give us just a perspective on that as to how that's been for you.
Yeah. So like we talked about relationships being a journey, I think being in relationship with our gods and ancestors is a journey as well. And as you go along this journey, you learn new things and have new experiences, and you have to incorporate those new things and new experiences into your perspective on how you see the world. And so as I've gone along in heathenry, my perspectives have changed and grown and matured and hopefully gotten better over time, at least better for me. And in terms of the relationship side of things, or trying to describe what it is, I think Erica put it really well. It's about being in touch with the earth around us and all of the beings that are a part of it. I'm very much tied into the land spirits within my own area and the spirits of my house. My family says the house is haunted. I just say it's the spirits that live here. And so, being tied into that, being in relationship with them, is an important part of what it's about. And I think one of the nice things about heathenry is that it doesn't have a set creed. It doesn't have a set of defined beliefs. That way you can grow into the religion in a way that's more natural for you. It's not something that's imposed from without. It's something that you develop from within. And I really like that about heathenry, in what it has meant to me as I've kind of gone along in my own journey.
That is, I like that saying too. Though it is sometimes nice just to have like a nice hefty book to throw at somebody when they ask you what you believe, like just a nice firm piece of hardware, just to be like, here, this is what I think.
Don't you want to just get you a copy of Our Troth and carry it around in your backpack?
Well, that actually might damage somebody. I think that book, like volume 1, would cause damage if it were a hardcover.
One, then.
Yeah,
it only takes one.
For a large. If
you have to get them all going in a volley.
Yeah, because
followed by 5 translations of the Eddas.
Yeah, if you miss one, I wanted to pass it to Tom. Tom, you're in an interesting position because you're in a position to grade a lot of essays, to read the lore from a really critical perspective. I'm sure that you've probably sat there and gone, well, this thing that I believed a little while ago doesn't quite make sense from this critical perspective, and then readjusted, right? And how does it feel to have to kind of readjust in that sense and then re-explain yourself over again?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I don't really think of myself as coming in. I mean, I didn't really come into heathenry as with a particular set of, theological doctrines that I was interested in, that I wanted to commit to say I believed in. It was more of an experiential thing. It was, I started having these kind of trance experiences and things with Odin. And so I was drawn to this one particular god, and I felt like there was a communication there. And so the real shocker for me in my conversion experience is that all of this stuff is real, and it can happen to people in real life. And so I know a whole bunch of lore, and but I don't think of reconstruction as being necessarily a complete reconstruction as being my end goal. I mean, the Vikings were only one of a whole bunch of Iron Age peoples with, fairly similar religious setups. And I don't think they have any kind of monopoly on the truth of the spiritual universe. I think it more as I'm in a kind of a marriage to Odin, and then his relatives and his culture or whatever kind of come along with him. There are a lot of parts of I guess what I would say is modern heathen theology that I find very congenial and that I think are probably true. I guess I've always had a thing about, what do I want to say? Following up on what I say and sort of being very careful about the wording of what I commit to that way. But I mean, I don't think that the Norse gods are the only gods that exist. And I don't necessarily think that if you went back to, 8th century Sweden, that the priest at Uppsala would have all the questions that need to be, all the answers to all the questions you might have. I mean, the Vikings didn't have toothpaste or toilet paper. They didn't know the world was round. They certainly didn't know any modern particle physics or whatever. So I view it as more of a kind of I hate to say personal commitment, which makes me sound too much like a certain kind of fundamentalist, but really the idea that the God is there and that I have a significant relationship with him. It's kind of like being married. Your spouse isn't the only person who exists, and they may not be the only person with whom you could have, I'm sure they're not the only person with whom you could have formed a marriage or a satisfactory relationship, but they are the one you pick and you commit to. So when it comes to interfacing, it's supposed to be about interfaith. Interfaith marriage is not my, personal theology or whatever. But, so I go to my wife's church fairly often. And a lot of what I do is deploy a kind of strategic silence for the little old church ladies. But it's not that I don't think Jesus is a God. I just don't think he's the God. And I don't really like his dad very much. But, to a certain extent, he's kind of, I don't know, my God-in-law. So, and it's hard to escape kind of some influence of his on my thoughts and reflections, because I live in America, which is so heavily Christian. So to some extent, I guess he is even my God. He's just not my main God, if that makes any sense.
It does. Absolutely. That's a really unique perspective on that. I hadn't thought of it that way before, where, the religion thought of as a relationship of one to another deity, and the notion of that relation, not really like ideas evolving as much as a relationship kind of unfolding. Some people say that marriage is, or love. Love doesn't just exist once. It's just falling in love again. If you can fall in love again and again with the same person, that's what love is. That's the true love kind of thing. If you just keep falling in love with that same person, and it's similar, like if you find yourself devoted to a particular God over and over and over again, maybe that's the one for you. Lauren, I wanted to talk to you about, so you're in a situation where it's your husband is, as you've said, his religion is D&D, but
yes.
But
you would think, and that actually has caused some conflicts with my heathenry. You would actually has like.
The funny thing is, I hear D&D terminology bleed over into heathenry all the time. Mm-hmm. For example, words like lore, canon, and I hear this kind of stuff like stats, buffs. I'm kidding, I don't know stats and buffs, but like you hear this kind of language all the time. How do you? So this kind of question is more about how we communicate our values in a faith where sometimes those values can be changing, even within us.
I do a ton of interfaith work, mostly with Christians. For those of you who don't know, I live in Arkansas. And to give a little bit of background, I was raised fundamentalist evangelical. If any of you guys have seen the documentary Shiny Happy People, I have flashbacks from that documentary. That was my childhood. So I really like to to me, it's really about sharing. To me, a lot of times it's about shared values. I know with my husband, I wasn't, my first husband was a heathen, and that ended very poorly, very poorly. Mainly because he became heathen because it was a religion that allowed him to drink. But that's neither here nor there. And so, after my divorce and going through several relationships with heathen men, I'll be honest with you, I really got down that I wanted to find someone who shared my values, and the religion part wasn't as important because, let's face it, there weren't that many heathens, and 10 years ago there were even fewer. 15 years ago, even worse. So to me, it was very much about finding someone who shared my values. And so to me, a lot of times when people ask what I believe in an interfaith setting, what I like to communicate is values that I know that we share, because that's how I can connect and work with someone who I don't share, because I could get into, and I have friends who are Christians, other Christian ministers that I absolutely can get into nitty-gritty theological discussions with, and we have great discussions and we walk away from it, better friends for it. But in general, for people, I like to communicate values, the values of inclusivity, there are values of social justice, especially are very helpful in interfaith settings, or talking to people who may not necessarily understand heathenry. It's kind of interesting. This is kind of the conversation I walked into, because this is the conversation I just had on Court TV, was trying to explain to a more conservative Christian audience, what the heck is an Odinist? What the heck's an Ásatrú? What's the heck's a heathen? And so very much focusing on communicating these things, very much about focusing on values, because I think, for me, in my experience with relationships, be it friendships or marriage or whatever, it's very much about, do we share values? Because the rest is, I'm like Tom. I am a true polytheist. I believe all gods have the potential to exist. I can't say they all exist because I haven't met them, don't know, but I do believe all gods have the potential to exist. Therefore, that's why, for instance, I pay in to help support a temple for a god I don't worship, but it's part of my voluntary land tax I give to the tribe that used to be here, is help them support their firekeeper. It's, to me, and you just never know when that god from another pantheon is going to come knocking on your door. It happens to a lot of us. Not to mention pantheons are kind of, kind of with Tom, I don't think an 8th century, Gothi in Uppsala would even understand our concept of pantheons. So in general, I try to share our values. I try to share, who we are on the level of the person I'm speaking to. It's very much about communicating it to the audience you're speaking to, rather than, who you are. That's why for instance, if I'm talking to that Court TV audience, or I'm talking to a group of Christian ministers, I'm going to focus on, we're community and family oriented. We place a great deal of emphasis on education and community service. I don't get into the mead and the cymbals and, the axe throwing immediately. However, if I'm at a Viking festival, I might go into the mead and the axe throwing. It just depends on your audience. And I think that's the most important thing, is that when you're talking about these things, but then, like with my husband probably knows more about heathenry than you could know, just from osmosis of absorbing it. But sometimes he and I conflict, because, like I said, his religion kind of is, my husband was raised completely non-religious, not an atheist, just non-religious. He attended a Mormon church a few times with cousins, and then he had other cousins that were snake handlers. But beyond that, he's from West Virginia. What can I say? He was raised pretty much non-religious. So we have very different backgrounds coming in. But it can be a problem, because sometimes there are things in D&D that I kind of struggle with. Like, any kind of sigil is immediately called a rune. And that kind of ticks me off, because then you run into stuff like what we're seeing with Delphi, where every straight line is a rune, or you're looking at things like that within some of these games where it becomes misinformation about things from heathenry can cause me to get a little twitchy in some of the games. And that's mostly because I understand how that misinformation can lead to other problems. But I will say, from the very public role that I take in heathenry, my husband has been really supportive. My husband is not a religious person, but he'll drive to festivals with me 4 hours. A lot of times he'll bring D&D with him, and random one shots will break out at pagan festivals when he's there.
I would.
Yeah,
there's some overlap. There's some overlap.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not saying that Heathen and D&D and SCA is a complete circle in a Venn diagram, but it's close.
Significant.
It's close.
Significant overlap.
But I do think talking about shared values, and that that within our kindred, even we've talked about that with the kids, and I know that discussion has been very much none of us are really worried about passing on as much hardcore about religion as we are passing on the values of the religion, because to me that's the most important thing. I think the gods are going to call who they will. If we can pass on that love of social justice, that love of community and relationship building, then I think you're doing a good job. And everything else is just window dressing, because at the end of the day, the best parts of my kindred are sitting around eating dinner, Ben and I getting into weird pun fights, and not him, Ben Wagner, and I get into weird pun fights. And I mean, to me, that's, and everything else is just kind of window dressing. But, I am lucky. My husband's very tolerant. Not many husbands would let me build an entire studio in the house to do podcasting and heathen stuff, or tolerate me being president of this organization. Let's be honest here.
The question is not who will let me, but who will stop me.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest.
Rand.
We made a joint decision for me running. It wasn't just my decision, because I also understood what toll that was going to take on our family, how much time that was going to take away. And so, it was very much a joint decision for me to run, just because that's, so even though he's not heathen, he has been very supportive. We jokingly call him heathen adjacent. But I do think it's important, and I have met several, I've had the joy of meeting Tom's spouse, and I love her. She's wonderful. And she is so supportive, and having seen that and seeing all these, I think it's beautiful to see these interfaith families. And I think that it's such a wonderful thing, because quite frankly, I would have loved to have had exposure to something other than, I thought religious diversity was Methodists and Baptists growing up.
Yeah.
Lutherans and Catholics.
Yeah.
No. What are those? We're talking Church of Christ was getting wild for me.
Yeah, no.
Lauren, you touched
Yeah,
on something
I was in rural
wanted to ask.
Georgia. It's the
wanted to
Methodist.
ask
Tom
the
gets
panel
it.
this time. I wanted to throw this out to the whole panel, because you mentioned something interesting as to what's important, because we want to getting into the topic of raising kids with an interfaith in a mixed faith marriage. How did you guys determine? And you guys can give me some tips. I have a 4-year-old. For those of you who are in the 6 and 8 and adult, successfully raised an adult range, what was important to you, or what continues to be important to you to pass on of your faith? Is it the rituals? Is it I got to make sure that my kid worships Thor when they're older? Or is it more like I just want to be sure they're kind and considerate people? And if our faith supports that and supports them and helps them be that better person, then I'm glad that that's along for the ride. I don't know if you guys feel like I just want the faith to be along for the ride, or what about it that you want to impart, I suppose. So I'm gonna start with you, Erica. With the wait, who's got the youngest here? I think
my son's 6. So
6,
Mine's 8.
8, and Tim's are grown. So we're gonna start with you.
My godson's just turned 13.
Okay, so we're gonna go. It's gonna go Erica, Tom, Lauren, and then Tim.
So this, I really just really quickly, sorry, I want to shift back to something that Lauren was saying about your husband being agnostic. So I have two siblings, right? 2 biological siblings who were also raised with the understand. We knew who the Norse gods were. We knew who Jesus was. Our parents let us choose. And I have a younger sister she refers to the Bible as Jesus fan fiction. So she is not a Christian, but every once in a while she will just open her mouth and a heathenry will come out. But she swears up and down that she's like, I'm an atheist. She says she's an atheist. And I'm like, you're the most heathen atheist I've ever met in my life. And that's all I could think about when you're talking about your husband is it really is, it's the values, right? Like that's what heathenry to me always boils down to. And that's actually one of the things we are trying to keep with our son. Like for me, heathenry, it's not about the God. I mean, it's about the gods, but it's not about the gods. It's not even about the ancestors. It's about how we treat each other. And a big thing for me is social justice is coming out. I am raising a white male human in this world. So one of the things I have to do as a person who's trying to dismantle my own prejudices that I don't even know I have, right, which is constant work, trying to raise him to be like, frankly, like Mr. Rogers, right? I want him to be out here being a good person. We refer to everybody he passes on the street as his neighbor. We pay attention to what the holidays are, like how I said, Ramadan Mubarak to whomever, right? And I talked about that on my podcast in the episode coming out. Like we try to recognize that or any Jewish holiday going on, and we wish our neighbors who are very clearly of those faiths and cultures happy whatever is going on for them, because I want him to understand that he is a singular entity in an entire world of other entities, and he needs to respect their space and their humanity. And that is what we are teaching him, which sometimes is actually most of the time is great, but sometimes there are like little kerfuffles where my husband's Hinduism and my heathenry bump up against each other. For example, in Vaishnavism or Hinduism, like my husband practices, you make offerings to the gods and to guru or whatever, and then you can eat those offerings. Not so much in heathenry. So, I mean, but my thing is, I'm like, oh, well, you give it to the gods. It's theirs. I wouldn't take your food. Why would we take theirs? And I happen to give Oreos because, I mean, they're Oreos. Everybody likes them. And so I'll sit them on a plate and put them on the family altar. And until about a year ago, I would have to remind my son and be like, please don't eat. I'll get you your own. You cannot eat Odin's Oreos. And so they belong to the All-Father. And so it was like, so there's that. That's pretty much the only real hiccup in our combined faith, in our household, because it's the only thing that doesn't really jive is one says you can do this, but the other says you can't. But yeah, sorry, back to the initial question. We're just trying to raise him with the values of being kind. I actually wrote a blog post similar to this years ago about the song Chicken Fried by the Zac Brown Band. And I was like, listen, the 9 noble virtues are crap. But if you want to have good virtues in your life, base them on this country song. Because they teach you to love your family, love your land, love the people around you, and be a decent human, regardless of what you believe. And so that's our goal for our son. That and to chew with his mouth closed. So
I mean, obvious, really. That's the one defining feature, I would say. Like, there's a heathen, chews with his mouth closed. Absolutely.
absolutely.
Tom, how about you? What would you say, like the things that you will say? I would say like things that you will say in the future, like I have raised a successful heathen. So
I
I've
don't know
successfully
if
raised a heathen.
well, one of the things when Diane and I decided to get married, we kind of went down a list of the things we wanted out of the marriage. And one of the things I agreed to is that we would raise any children in her church. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One of them is, her church and its organization goes all the way back to the Civil War. And, she's got a really close community. And, I'm mostly a solitary practitioner. So it didn't seem like it was a pretty difficult religion, which one we were going to pick. Plus, I'm not sure I want to take a little brown kid and raise them up with Odin as their primary deity. No matter how inclusive I am or the Troth is or whatever, that's still going to be a really awkward social space to negotiate, especially in the South. But I am not hiding anything either. And I assume that at some point she's going to start asking questions about this. She's not quite there yet. And that's when we're going to have any potential landmines will be revealed. But yeah, and it seems weird to say it, but I actually would feel kind of weird if my kid went for Odin right away. I mean, I feel like Odin is going to look, like Lauren said, is going to pick the people he picks. And he's a fairly ambiguous and often, I don't know, kind of amoral and dangerous sort of supernatural entity. And I'm okay with taking that kind of risk with myself. But, I'm not sure. I would feel kind of weird if she formed a very close relationship with Odin before she had more maturity on her. So, and I don't think it's going to happen either, but just like I'm trying to have her, not date a 20-year-old when she's 12, and I'm trying to keep her from sticking a fork in an electric socket when she's 3. I have a kind of ambiguous feeling about her and Odin, maybe not some of the other Norse gods. But, I've taken her to heathen events, and she's seen various rituals. I'm not sure she quite understands them yet, but I assume at some point I will explain this to her, and she'll at least know what I believe, even if it doesn't click with her.
Yeah. And is there anything that you would say that you would see her do? So maybe she's not. She hopefully, maybe we say like hopefully, like she doesn't come home dragging Odin with her. As a maybe 12 or 13-year-old. But is there something she would do that your kid would do and say like, okay, yes, I'm glad this value was imparted.
Well, I mean, Diane and I have very similar ethics and politics. She's big into the Democrats, doing liberal and progressive politics. And I think we have a similar view about ethical things, telling the truth, what's correct behavior, those kinds of things that I think are to some degree sort of religion independent that I would like to have her do. I don't know. Every night when I pray that she grows up to be brave and strong and wise, and that would make me happy. And I don't, whatever deity she chooses to follow, I'd probably be a little bit disappointed if she turned out to be a hardcore conservative fundamentalist. But the African American Baptist tradition is quite a bit different than the sort of standard issue Protestantism that I was around. White people in white people Christianity in Georgia. I remember. They were the town I was in, a lot of the people were very sort of fundamentalist, closed-minded, very socially conservative. So, you know, I guess if she grows up and votes Republican, I won't be too happy about that either. But, you know.
I was going to end. Oh, Lauren. So now you have a kind of like a nephew.
So I have a godson, but I also, my first marriage raised 3 children. Mm-hmm. And while my ex-husband they were stepchildren, and while my ex-husband was heathen, his first wife, their mother, was a Christian. So we were dealing with an interfaith situation there. And I'm very closely involved with my godson. We've had a kindred since like 7 years before he was born. I hooked his parents up on their first date. I mean, I'm there all the time. I'm pretty much I'm auntie. But you know, it's a conversation we've had as a kindred and, you know, as a community about the kids, because we kind of have a village mentality. And to me, it's, you know, it's definitely about raising kids in the South. You know, my godson is in a unique position because he's biracial, but he's white passing. And so he hears a lot of stuff that's really crappy. And he spent his whole life having his mom asked, are you the nanny? Are you, you know, this, that, and the other. And so to me, I think it's all about just raising a kid who's strong in the face of what we're dealing with here, where I am, you know, where he's seeing a lot of his friends being persecuted for being queer, for being trans, for being not straight white Christian. And I'm really proud of him. I actually bought him a shirt because he may have gotten into a fight at school, but it was defending a queer kid. So I got him a shirt that said I punched someone for calling another kid gay, and all I got was a stupid t-shirt. You know, and it's stuff like that. I'm very proud. And that's the thing, like he's a full Thorsman. I mean, he has been since he was little. I mean, it's the way he is. But to me, it's all about hoping that he grows up with that really strong sense of justice and community and belief in doing what's right, even when it's hard. And he has. I mean, the kid read the Communist Manifesto by the time he was 12. I love this kid. He's so great. I mean, he can like give you like long talks about socialist theory. I didn't even know what socialist theory was at 12. I mean, and that to me is such a joy of knowing, you know, but I do hope he, you know, with that comes some, you know, when you raise a kid who is, you know, when you have a kid or you become very much more socially conscious, it can come with a lot of emotional baggage. And so my hope for him is that he's able to stay this socially engaged, but not get dragged into the horrible, crippling feeling of nihilism that I've had to deal with over the past few years. And I think Gen Alpha, Gen Z is gonna rock our socks, right? You know, and as far as my stepkids, I've been very proud of them because, you know, I was only in their life for about 5 years, but I am still in contact with them. And they definitely have taken some of the things I taught them from, you know, when they were little about being really community oriented. You know, the youngest one's in the Marines. The oldest one is an engineer. He's doing great. And I think that's really important, is to really make sure that, you know, they're happy. I think that's the thing. I hope the joy of life and living for today and not being worried about what's to come. You know, if I can help any kid within my sphere of influence not have to grow up with the fear I had growing up of the rapture, the end times, am I going to heaven? You know, that kind of stuff. Grow up with joy and not worrying and enjoying the here and now and not worrying about some future afterlife. You know, to me, if I can spare someone or the shame of purity culture, basically, if I can just shield them from all that, I'll be happy. because I know all of the things that I went through. And so, like I said, if I can just prevent those people from having those things, I'm happy.
Love that, Lauren. Love that. And it's really great that you're still involved in your stepkids' life, even though you were there for 5 years of their life, you still stayed in contact. I think that's I think that to me speaks of the heathen value of community as well. Like the commitment you have to the children you have indeed helped shape and help raise. I think that's really spectacular. Regardless of how it worked out with your co-parent. But to Tim, who has raised a grown up, as my daughter says, yeah. And how so for you who've been through from birth to now adulthood to now being a grandfather, what is it that you'd hoped to impart on your kids, or like what is it that you see in them now that you say I done good? What is it that you see now in them that makes you feel that way?
Yeah. I'm watching my two older children now raise their children, and watching them teach their kids, just how to be good people, how to relate to the community around them, being able to provide a sense of safety for their children, all things that I hope I imparted on my kids when they were growing up, and watching them share those same values over again is, for me, really rewarding. In terms of my own grandchildren, watching them grow, Lauren's kind of a hard act to follow, but I think in terms of wanting to see them grow up to be good people, to be kind people, to be good to not only their family members, but to the community around them, I think is the values that I want to see imparted to my kids. So it's not so much, having them adopt my religion, is having them adopt similar values in terms of social justice and in terms of being good people that I hope to see and watch them grow in as they continue to develop.
Yeah, what I'm hearing overall is like the way that our children, how we feel like our children are going to shape the world, is very, very important. So not necessarily what they internally think or believe, or which God they internally think or believe, but how they act and act and indeed shape the world. Tom, you were talking about politics before. Politics is a way that somebody shapes the world. We can say this as a 501c3. We can still say it is very important that people go out and vote and be civically active. It is how people shape the world. I'm not going to tell you necessarily how or what to vote on, but I am going to tell you that voting and civic engagement is very, very important, and it is how we shape the world, and it's how our kids are going to shape the world too. So that's important message. And
I want to say from an official kind of standpoint here, that's a heathen value that we can actually trace into the lore is civic engagement. And I think that, where you can be civically engaged and encourage your kids, I will say, for all the things I can say about my childhood growing up, one of the things my mother and my parents always did was took us with them when they went to vote. And that's, we always saw them voting, and we always saw it, growing up in a town of like less than 1,000 people, elections could be decided by 1 or 2 votes. The mayor's election was often decided by less than 10 votes. And so it is very important. And I think we have to keep that in mind, keep them engaged. And, I think that it's super important, because that's the only way we're going to make changes, is to stay engaged, no matter how discouraged you feel right now. If you do, like I do, I feel very discouraged. So civic engagement, from everything to, the dog catcher to the president, is important.
Yeah. and I also want to say that I'm not suggesting voting is the be all and end all. It is to me the bare minimum that one can do, that to exercise that. So there's so much more that you can do from a civic engagement point of view. There are plenty of places where you can get involved in your community, and as Lauren said, it's certainly a heathen value to do so. So message of the evening, in addition to treat your kids well, is to get civically involved and encourage civic engagement from your children too. What I also wanted to know is from the panel, because there's something that came up, and I don't know how funny this is going to be. I don't know how this is going to land, but heathen men. I have heard this comment that heathen men, when I see them going out into the world to try and find somebody, it's usually like, I'm going to find a shield maiden. I'm going to find another heathen. Yeah, I'm going to find another heathen woman to come. But I don't quite see the same thing from heathen women. I don't quite see the same urgency, let's say, to find a heathen man. Is there? What's the disconnect here? And is it even something that is it something that heathen men really need to start paying attention to? Is that heathen women would just rather not?
How do I say this delicately?
Girl, don't say it delicately.
When it comes to
you
a
held up
lot
a
of
hammer.
when it comes to a lot of single heathen men, the odds aren't good and the goods are odd.
Testosterone poisoning is a terrible thing.
I mean, I'm serious. It's having, like, when I got divorced, there used to be a Yahoo group for single heathen dating, and I was a member. I have never gotten more vulgar emails and grossness.
But
than,
yeah,
and I've been on dating apps. I got more grossness from that email group than I did from any dating app.
So
I have seen way too many heathen men's hammers for my taste. Unsolicited. Unsolicited.
Well, yeah. I was lucky enough to participate in the Parliament of World Religions a handful of years ago, and I was on it with, for anybody who knows her, Becky Sheehan, and another woman, and who I'm not mentioning because she's not a heathen, but people do know Becky. And it was talking about, the focus was on women and women in religion and women's rights. And I so deeply wanted to actually have it be titled The Madonna Whore Problem Within Heathenry. But since not everybody was a heathen, I was like, okay, we can't do that. We have to, and we just talked about women's experiences in religion and paganism in general. But I do come back to that Madonna whore concept, where a lot of heathen men, and I assume no one in this chat because you're all still here, but a lot of heathen men are looking for Freya or Frigg. And if you are not Freya and Freya and Frigg. And if you're not Freya and Frigg, well, why are you even here? What is your value? And it's like, bro, I like literally, I'm 40 years old. I'll be 41 in November. And while I haven't always been, the Gothi or Githya, however you want to say it, of a kindred, I have known these deities my whole life. And I've actually had to argue with heathen men before and be like, do you not understand how ridiculous you sound? Like, Frigg knows what Odin knows. She doesn't say anything. Freya is how Odin learned magic. Like, do you not understand that women are more valuable than their secondary sex organs? Like, do you not understand? Get out of my face. And so the whole shield maiden concept is so juvenile. It's so juvenile. You've got people like, I'm going to use Tom as an example, who came to heathenry through scholarship and was like, okay, this jives. And then, Odin shows up like he does. But so you have somebody who actually understands the lore and has read it. And I try not to be ableist. I have ADHD, and our lore can be boring, even the exciting parts, right? It's sitting and reading for long periods of time can be hard. so I try not to like edda thump at people, but on the same vein, I'm like, when you reduce the female presenting contingent of heathenry down to the overly sexualized concept of like a woman in a bikini fighting off hordes of people, this is not World of Warcraft. Okay, this is real life. And so I don't know, this is just, end rant. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, but this is a huge issue. And I will say this. I don't have my hair covered right now because I'm at home, but I do cover my hair in pagan space, in ritual spaces. And I bring this up because the only time I have ever had someone try to remove my headscarf was at a heathen event, and it was a woman who identified as a shield maiden. And she was, I guess, the protector of her kindred. I'm still not sure why she did it. She tried to pull my headscarf off of me, and she actually pulled a sword on me because I happen to deal with a very specific entity who's not, it's Loki, but who, a decade ago wasn't super welcome in spaces. And so they were fine with me as this woman until they realized I was not the right kind of woman. And then they sent this person in to kind of, does it make sense what I'm saying? So like we have this, it's incredibly juvenile. It's incredibly unaware of even just the female deity energy across the spectrum of heathenry. And just, so when we reduce all of female heathenry into being a shield maiden, it's juvenile, but it's also kind of fetishy and gross. Like, these are the same people who think they're Vikings. I don't know how to tell you that the people of Scandinavia were farmers and fishermen. Like, it's not sexy. You ever been covered in dirt? That's not hot. It's life.
Nah.
Sorry.
I just want to, there's a historical tie to this. Oh my God. So if you look at the earliest influence on Steve McNallen, his earliest heathenry, well, but I mean, you think about it, as much as we can argue this, that, and the other, but McNallen was a huge influence in early heathenry, right? Love or hate it. But his biggest influences were Conan and a whole bunch of like 1960s the movie The Vikings.
Yeah,
all of
the
this,
little
like,
adventure novels, right? The
adventure novels,
wild tales for young boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but then I want to know where are y'all three's loincloths?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Not a single loincloth.
Well, firstly, Erica, I just want to point out that none of you guys can see like from the chest down for any of us, so we could be wearing our ceremonial loincloths.
Okay, you know what? Fair.
As is our tradition.
But I totally get what you're saying with that, and it's yeah. I mean, are you the right kind of woman? As someone who works in predominantly male spaces, that's a question I get constantly. And full disclosure here, I don't think I've ever said this on the show. I don't think I've ever said this too publicly. I have autism. I don't get social cues all the time. I mess up quite frequently because of it. And that by definition doesn't make me the right kind of person in a lot of these circles. And I'm not conventionally attractive. I've been treated horribly by men at heathen events. Either when I was younger and more thin and attractive, I was sexualized, or I'm treated like crap because I'm old and fat now. And there's no in between. I will say Troth spaces are and some other inclusive spaces have been the only places I felt safe, right? I felt okay. But a lot of other places, even in inclusive spaces, women are fetishized. The call of, we need the shield maidens and witches to come defend us and stuff by men. And I'm like, no, go away. I don't know. Why? No.
If you guys are wondering why it is that, so we're talking about interfaith marriages, why is it that it seems like heathen men and heathen women don't seem to link up as much? There's there is a reason, and we're going into it. Like it's important to know, because you think in other faiths it seems to be almost a foregone conclusion, especially in more conservative faiths, where it's like, oh, of course you're just going to marry another blank. Like, you're a Baptist, you're going to marry a Baptist. You're a Catholic, you're going to marry a Catholic. If you're a heathen, like it's and I would even say, like, especially if you're a heathen, a femme presenting heathen, that is not a tantalizing proposition, and there's a good reason why that's not necessarily a tantalizing proposition. It's very much this idea that women in heathenry, to I don't know if this is quoting Simone de Beauvoir, just paraphrasing, but is that being for others, that she's just there for someone else. It's not that she's here for herself. She's here for her own interest. She's here because she's an equal co-religionist. She's a devotee of this particular god or goddess. She has her own opinions. It's, oh, woman here, that's for me. She's here for me to gawk at and look at and judge, right? To say you're the right kind of woman or you're not.
Well, we have a story of this in the lore, when the Jotun take Thor's hammer, right? They take Mjolnir, and they're like, we want Freya, and she's just like, go be Freya your gosh darn self, and she makes Thor go be the Freya that these Jotun are demanding, because she's like, I'm not going to save you. I'm not your mommy. That's not my job. You're the one who's supposed to be saving people. I'm the one who's having sex with dwarves. Do your job. I do mine. And but that's the thing. This absolutely comes up. This comes up, and I know Lauren knows exactly what I'm talking about. Again, 40 years. Even if I take out the first 15 years of my life, 25 years of dedicated heathenry focused on these entities and living these values, I have had people tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. People who have been heathen for 5 minutes, people who have been heathens less than my son has, and he is 6. And they'll question my not authority, but they'll question my expertise. They question whether or not I'm supposed to be in charge of the kindred. They ask me if I'm sure I know what I'm talking about. And it's just, it's like, is this because I'm a woman? Like, because you're not doing it to the man standing right next to me. And a lot of this comes from, and I feel awful saying this because this is an interfaith thing, a lot of this comes from baggage that's held over from the patriarchy of their previous faith that they were raised in. And this is something we do see from like McNallen and the AFA and things like that. When your group starts with a weird racist guy who was too weird for Hitler over in Australia, and then you bring it over here and you have your weird whatever going on. You've got these new baby heathens, not all of them are babies, but you've got these newer heathens men who are expecting to continue to have like this male-centric faith system that values their opinions more than the women's opinions. And, I've made this comment to multiple women that I know, including, Patty LaFale. I may have said it to Lauren at one point or another. The early church for heathenry, at least in my opinion, and it is being pushed forward by women. And I know that technically the early church is like the Ásatrú Free Assembly and the Ring of Troth, but like the stuff where our feet are on the ground and we're in there working and we're building communities and going into prisons and doing interfaith work and breaking down all the terrible isms, a lot of, if not most of that work is being done on the backs of women. Because as much as it sucks, we're seen as gentle and more kind, and it's easier for us to get in there because, women are loved. But I'd like to remind everyone, Freya isn't just a goddess of love. She's also a goddess of war, and not a shield maiden. She's in charge of things. So like, let's remember that. So,
and to add to that, I mean, I can back up everything you're saying about it being developed on the backs of women with evidence from the runestone, from early issues of Aduna, from publications by the early Theodish, every group in the 80s, because believe me, I've read all of it. And I can back up everything you're saying. The problem is it's not that different from any evangelical church you go to, where men are in charge, but it's made on the back of women.
Yeah.
I mean, even, the early Troth, yes, you had men nominally in charge, but the person who actually kept things going was Diane Ross.
Mhm.
You basically had 3 20-year-old like scholars who were really smart, but you needed someone else older and more experienced to actually keep them going in the same direction. And that's, part of the problem is that for a lot of these people who come in, they haven't unpacked the baggage of their previous faith or previous experiences. The first thing I have people read, one of the first things I have people read after I have them read Patty's book, when I teach heathenry, is Women in Old Norse Society, because it's the most balanced book I could find about both men and women. And it kind of, if guys balk at it and they don't want to read it, well, then they can get out. I've just figured out you don't belong here. But it really kind of helps temper that. And I think it's such a great book. But to me, it's so difficult to get people to understand, go look, guys, I used to do another show here on YouTube. If you go look at the comments, I can say something. One of my male co-hosts can say the exact same thing. And there's tons of comments about how dumb I am and how horrible I am and how stupid I am and how brilliant they are. Like, for saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that's been, I'm a computer programmer, story of my life. I work public health programmer. I mean, I literally sometimes have to get my coworker to repeat what I'm saying so that these old redneck guys I'm dealing with will actually do what I'm telling them.
Shield maiden is such a weird thing to fetishize and to associate with like female subservience, because like an actual shield maiden would like gut them like a fish for their disrespect. You think Scotty would put up with that, or Freya?
Well, it's the busty chick on the cover of Heavy Metal that they're thinking of when they think of Shield Maiden.
Well,
I just dated myself there.
It's
I think we suffer because
yeah.
Vikings are such a symbol of hyper masculinity. People come into heathenry following that, and they bring all the problems with masculinity that we've got in all the rest of the culture with them. I'm not sure it's about them and I'm not even sure it's about them unlearning their Christianity. Maybe they need to unlearn their violent barbarian.
Yeah, or the patriarchy gets into both, right?
Yeah.
It conditions both the form of Christianity we have and also the form of heathenry that people think ought to be, or think that it was, think it ought to be rather, and think that it ought to be this world where it's a man's space, that women are allowed in if they serve the needs of men, right? Like this is the man's space, and women get to come in if they serve some kind of need. And now I'm not saying that because I believe it. I'm saying I would say that's the patriarchal kind of worldview of the positions of authority are male. Women can come in as they serve that particular need. And there are very, how would I say this? Pigeonholed visions of like what roles women are allowed to take. As you were saying, Erica, Freya or Frigg. The Freya and the Frigg, like there's this very pigeonholed role that a woman is supposed to take, and this is part of why, as this is a multi-faith relationship discussion, why it is that all of us are in multi-faith marriages, and so many heathens are, and this is usual, right, guys? Like it's actually quite usual. One, we're a very small religion, right? It's kind of hard to find another person like us, and two, there's this problem we've been talking about, which is this idea that this is a man's space, and women can only find their way in it if they serve the needs of men, and it's something that has to change if you want to see heathen relationships at all.
Yeah, I think I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead,
I
Tim.
think one of the reasons why my wife and I have been together so long is that we're equal partners in this relationship, and that, you know, it's through that equal partnership that we gain strength from one another and are able to overcome the challenges that life has thrown at us. It's not, you know, me dominating the relationship over her. It's us approaching this as combined forces to make things happen and to get through the challenges that life presents to us. And, you know, I think that's what some of these fetishized versions don't take into account, is that it is an equal partnership. And that if you really want to have a strong relationship, if you want to have a good relationship with your spouse, regardless of what religious background you come from, it has to begin from equal footing.
That's a perfect way, Tim. Because we are
Yeah.
going to wrap this up soon, and I want everyone to have one last piece that I really want to get out is I would love it if everyone could take that experience they've had with these relationships, and you guys are, and one of the things I love about this is all of you guys, all of us, are at different points in those relationships and have had such different experiences, both in the faith that our partner is, both in how long we've been partnered, how many kids we have, how old. I would just like to know if you had to give one piece of advice to someone just starting out or thinking about getting married or thinking about partnering long term with someone who is not heathen, what's the one bit of advice that you would give that person to make that work? And we're gonna start with Lauren, who's just right over to my right here.
I am going to say that most importantly, don't compromise on your values. And also, you have to make sure your own lifeboat's inflated before you try to rescue someone else. So take care of yourself first. If you need therapy, get therapy. If you need to figure out your own spiritual space, figure out your own spiritual space. You need to be the person that you want the person that you are going to love to have. And whatever that means, to get yourself in a mental and spiritual place of wellness. Because a lot of times those of us who come from difficult religious backgrounds have a lot of trauma we need to work through. And so my big encouragement is just to make sure that you've worked through that trauma, worked through a lot of stuff, and also just don't rush into things. Please don't marry a guy because all your friends are getting married. It's not a smart idea, especially when you're 23. Yeah. So that's all I have to say about that.
23. It's still young. Sorry. Look, it's still quite young. Erica, what would you say is a bit of advice that you want to leave with our listeners?
So I'm going to echo all of what Lauren said, but especially when it comes to values, do not compromise on your values. And so there's that, like, stay firm in what you believe, know who you are as an individual, and just stand firm in that. But also, don't be with someone who disrespects what you believe in. Like, that's it. My husband has only made one joke ever about heathenry, and it wasn't really a joke. There was a thunderstorm. I said, "Hail Thor," and he jokingly lifted up a bottle of Mountain Dew, which of course he did, and said, "Hail Iron Man," because he thought he was funny. And then it was like full-on thunderclap, and then lightning struck outside of our Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn apartment where we used to live. And I went, "You see that? Thor doesn't think you're funny." And he's never done it since. He was being silly, and that was, God, we'd been together for 12 years at that point. But that joke aside, because he was being silly, he has the utmost respect for my faith. He has the utmost respect for my kindred. He knows the kindred members' birthdays and allergies better than I do. And like, it's important to have your partner respect you and also be willing to step in and and defend your faith, even if it's not theirs. So don't let them disrespect it. Don't let them disrespect your values and who you are as a person, because that's just a slippery slope.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Tom.
You just said what I was going to say. So that's, and I guess I think it has worked because we have a kind of a respect for each other's sort of spiritual priorities. I mean, I know she's still not quite sure about Odin. I'm still not quite sure about Jesus, but we at least have a respect for each other's experiences and the, I guess, autonomy and seriousness. Or maybe, I mean, I think I just lucked out.
You did, Tom. You really did. She's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we got married real fast, and in the same time, I was going through a religious conversion and all of this stuff. And that could have gone really bad if it hadn't been her, if it had been somebody else.
Amazing.
So don't do as I say, don't do as I do.
Can I just interrupt really quick? I'm sorry, and say this one thing. Sorry, I'm skipping in front of Tim. When I was saying, make sure your partner respects your faith, Tom is a really good example of this. I've never met Tom. Yes. This is my first time interacting with this man in this forum. The way you have spoken about your wife's church, and just your face kind of lights up a little bit when you're talking about it. There's pride there, in the history there, in the community there, and you seem genuinely pleased that your child is being raised in this community filled with love and history and connection. And that's what I'm talking about. Find somebody who is so excited for your faith, whether it's theirs or not, that they're willing to talk about it on a public forum to strangers on the internet. In a nice way. Like that's.
And hopefully no one from my wife's church watching. One of these days they're going to find out about me, and it's going to be interesting.
Well, find out you said all these nice things. And
just Tom, just tell them you're Scandinavian Orthodox. That's what I used to tell people when I worked at the gospel station. I was Scandinavian Orthodox.
I'm using that now. Thank you. Sorry, Tim.
I think one of the most important things that is, played a role in my life is always approach your spouse with a sense of wonder. That's what allows you to fall in love with them all over again, each and every day. And don't lose that sense of wonder, because that's what makes it special.
Oh, Tim, you gets me misty-eyed every single time. And especially, this is such a great panel. I am so glad you guys are here. My only parting advice to those of you out there is to recognize that there are things that you love about your partner that, if you're in a multi-faith relationship, there are things that you love about them that come directly from that faith that they have. And just to always remember that there are things that you cherish, there are values that they have that are intrinsically for them tied to their faith. And to remember that that's part of what you love about them. And thus, you kind of love their faith too, a little bit. If you love that person that they are, and you love the thing, the values that they have, then you kind of love their religion too, a little bit. Some of the time. Anyway, so I would say yes, just realize that part of what you love about them is that faith, regardless. It has been so wonderful to have this, I think it's our biggest panel ever, which is just wonderful. So many different experiences. And I want to thank, so everyone here is Erica, are you in the Troth? Oh, she's on mute and said no. But she's our one. But we are always glad to have people. There's our outlier.
Erica. Come
yeah,
listen to me. I know Paul Mercurio, and he's been working on me. Paul and Ethan Stark are some of my kinsmen. Like, I've got it coming from all sides.
I'll get Kyle after you too.
Listen,
You're gonna.
I have
Your
ADHD.
kinsmen are my friends now, so
I have ADHD, and I'm a middle child and a Scorpio. You do your best.
I'm a Capricorn with autism. Bring it.
We started a war. But no, Erica, it's been as we are all in the Troth, and you will then be our guest. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm so glad we had you on, and everyone check out Erica's podcast when you get the chance. Also interesting topics too. So, and from all of us at the Troth to all of you, we just want to say have a great night, and see you guys next week.
Thank you.